Hi everyone and welcome to episode 11 of Business of Aspiration. Here with me, virtually, I have Waqas Ali, who is the founder of a footwear company, Atoms. And in a sec, Waqas is going to tell you all about it. But just before we start, I also want to say that Waqas' passion, which I just learned and I'm fascinated by, is to find the first edition of magazines across different verticals, architecture, design, fashion, and locate it and see what those guys were up to then, how they were thinking about growing from there. So Waqas, welcome and thanks for joining.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Great. So what about Atoms?
So Atoms is,
who don't know, what should they know? I happen to know about it.
Yeah. So Atoms is a sneaker company, and we just make one sneaker and we make it as best as we can, and we are improving it every year. At the moment, we are also making masks. So earlier this year, we started responding to what was happening in New York City, especially shortage of masks. So we started making very high quality non-medical masks, and we have sold hundreds of thousands of masks, and a lot of people are learning about the brand for the first time through masks. So that is also a good challenge, that we are a small sneaker company that started last year in June, and we have been selling shoes, and now we are also selling masks, which are doing really well.
Okay, so you say you're a small sneaker company. You started only last year. You're making one shoe. You're, according to philosophy, do one thing and do one thing well. So tell me more about your value chain. When you say you're small, what does it mean? Where do your materials come from? Who is designing your shoes? Who is producing them? And how you're distributing them?
Yeah, so there is a little bit of context. Yes, we are literally a small company, and I like to use the word small as a reminder to us that we are a small company. It's very easy to forget that you have the whole world at your mercy, or you have all the resources, you have all the time. I think the smallness allows you to do some really incredible stuff. And this also goes back to our story. So this is actually my second shoe company with my co-founder and also wife, Sidra. So we have a shoe company which we started.
How does that work? Like being married to your co-founder?
It is one of the most fulfilling things. It's one of the most intense things you will ever come across. I mean, that also depends on like in different dynamics. In our case, like, so this is actually our third company together.
What's your first company? Your marriage incorporated? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, so the first company was back when I was still in college in Lahore. So I'm originally from Pakistan, in a small village in Pakistan. Moved my way up to a bigger town where I met Sidra, then moved to Lahore, where I went for college to study physics. Ended up starting a company while I was in college, which was basically like an internet company, like helping other people how to use internet. Around the same time, I met with these craftsmen in my village who were making leather shoes in my village. And I was fascinated by that. Like the craftsmanship quality was really good, but the design was not there. They were not like really selling much. So I wanted to help them how to sell your shoes on the internet. And we had this challenge to come up with $1,000 between 4 people, and I couldn't come up with $250. So we didn't start the company at that time in 2011. But we kept at it. In 2012, finally, like we got some money. We started that business called Hometown, a small shoe, because it started from my hometown. So we started Hometown Shoes, making leather handcrafted shoes. And then we did that on Kickstarter. We launched a Kickstarter campaign in 2014. And then that Kickstarter really blew up. We raised over 100,000 US dollar on Kickstarter. We also delivered in time. And actually that was a very interesting time how we built the community. So that's actually first time when I really learned the power of community and how people can really like help you. So we did the Kickstarter campaign. And then once we had the shoes ready, I flew from Pakistan to the US to deliver shoes to a lot of customers in person. So there is this video on the internet. And actually, I did not know at that time in the US, you're not supposed to just show up at people's house like with their shoes. But it was a lot of fun. I made a lot of friends.
You can show like the traveling salesman. It's like American lore, you know?
Yeah, but you know, You never know who is at home, who is not. I would just be like, if you had backed our Kickstarter campaign and had given us your shipping address, I would be like 2 minutes away from your house, and then I would text you, hey Anna, I have Vikas, you backed our Kickstarter campaign, and I'm here with your shoes. Are you home? So it
But you know
worked.
what? Like Sarah Jessica Parker, she's doing that now with her own shoe company. She's personally delivering, you know? So that's a great touch and a great way to build a community.
Yes, and the thing is like my learning is like we all want these relationship. We all want these customers to love us. We want them to like advocate the brand and the community. I think the best communities are built not when you are trying to build a community, but when you are trying to do something more meaningful in
You
101
can't
or
just be
one
like,
to many.
all right, guys, you're my community. And everyone is like, go away, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. So
So
that was your second company or Atoms?
so yes. Then we moved to the US in 2015
Aha. So
when
you
when
flew from Pakistan and delivered the shoes, basically.
yes, 2014, and I also raised small investment in Silicon Valley. That's how
Oh.
I
How did that
yeah.
go? What's your experience with that?
With raising money or with first trip in the US.
No, with raising money from Silicon Valley.
So now I have raised a lot of money. So that was that time $15,000 from a small investor was the first check. Now we have raised over $10 million in total. So now I have a lot of experience in raising money. And
Right.
yeah, but raising that 15,000 was not simple and not easy. Like even my English was not that good. If you had talked to me in 2015 or 14, I would be more paying attention to my grammar than like the content of the conversation. So it was like a learning curve every step of the way. And we also got funded by Y Combinator later
That's
that year.
great. That's great. Yeah.
And
You
we were
just
the
go
first.
straight to the best. Straight to the best, right?
Yes, I would say that, like, because in I dropped out of college. It was not fancy dropout, but it was like I could not really keep up with college. I couldn't afford to like clear my college. So, and I was like just distracted by all these responsibilities that were on me, on financial
Like building
responsibilities.
the actual business. You mean the real?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So when we so in 2014 we did the Kickstarter. In 2015 we got funded by Y Combinator, and then Sidra and I moved to the US, and we started selling and our dress shoes and working with craftsmen in Pakistan.
Right.
During this
So you're
time,
still working with craftsmen in Pakistan, but your operation was in the US. Your sales were in. Who were your distributors here?
just direct to consumer from our
So
website.
how did you make your brand known? What is the name of that brand? Hometown,
So
right?
so it was hometown, and then when I came to US, I learned about hometown buffet, and then I was like, oh, that is not a good brand name here in the US. So we changed it to Markhor. Markhor is the national animal of Pakistan. It's an iconic goat, so it's changed from name from hometown to Markhor.
Okay.
uh, and our team in Pakistan was running that, and we were here working on growth and all those things. Around the same time, like later, so in 2016 actually, we and end of 2015 we started noticing that world was moving away from like very formal clothing to more of a casual clothing.
Right.
Yes, people were buying our dress shoes and they were wearing them when they were going to formal events, but there was a whole new trend uh, of like uh, of like informal and sneaker. And around the same time, our team went to Italy. Sidra went to Italy with our team. They were going to some like shoe exhibition and fashion exhibition. And
Mm-hmm.
we saw that in Italy, their like leather shoes are very famous, the Italian craftsmanship, all of that. But young people in Italy were also wearing sneakers by Adidas and by like Nike and all those like European sneakers, simple brands, instead of wearing the dress shoes, even for their day-to-day work.
Right.
And then we also saw that how the culture was. So one of my learning is like best of the best brands are built on some kind of culture.
Mm-hmm.
And even like big companies are built on based of some culture, and culture can be it can be like a different kind of culture. So for example, uh, I think the early luxury industry was built on the Wall Street culture, the banking culture, the wealth culture. You show a businessman wearing a suit, wearing nice shoes, wearing like carrying their like suitcase and all of that, we carrying their Remova, all of that. So you see that fashion culture was built on part business, part it was built on Hollywood, and part it was built on like uh, this whole idea of like art as well. And now we were seeing that cultures were built on things like sports. Like Nike started very early on the running culture actually, and then from running to they went into like more like general sports, and now from sports to they are like sports entertainment, sports plus entertainment. So we were learning all of these. So imagine like me and Sidra. So actually, we would like buy books that were about these things, and we would just go to Golden Gate Park and just read for like days and days. And we would like read old press releases. We would watch like old documentaries, and we would like look at early website of Nike from like way back machine. We would like do all these research. We would talk to customers, and that's like, and then we actually were advised by someone that go and talk to shoe stores managers. So many times Sidra and I would go to Nike store and we would just sit like this for like hours. Like we would just watch everyone buying shoes. And we decided that we are going to make shoes for this creative kind of person, people who have good taste. So we would wait for people to come in. And whenever we would see like that person, we would start following them like, hey, you picked that shoes, but why did not you buy that? What are you looking for? And then they're like, I hate tying shoelaces. We said, but then why you don't buy a slip-on? He said, no, I love the look of the shoelaces on my shoes, but I hate tying them. So we learned all these things at the same time. So it was like a
what, the people are crazy.
yeah, and we were also like wearing this beginner hat, which is like a reminder when I say like small company is like you want to always know that you are on a beginner mind, you are like learning. Even for example, I think that's my relationship type is even if you are married with someone for a long time, you want to have days where you are meet them with as like you're meeting them for the first time. You are like just very curious about them. So uh, so we were very curious about the whole footwear industry and mainly studying Nike, Adidas, and this was like little before like all the D2C companies were starting off. So we knew like we need to make a sneaker that people would want to wear every day because we want our product to be used. And that is like our approach. For example, if I have like a pen, uh, if I make a pen for writing and you buy my pen, I want you to write with that. I don't value only the sales, I value the use. So that is a different mindset which we operate and we think about. If you buy 10 pens from us and you don't use any of them and you just like put them, we have not really succeeded. If you buy one and you use that a lot, we have succeeded.
Right. At the same time, since we're now talking about the aspiration and the, this whole title is the business of aspiration, sometimes people buy things not to use them, but to show off with them or to just feel better about themselves. That there are like different motivations. I understand in your category, of course, if you're buying a sports shoe, you don't, you want that to be used because unless that sports shoe you acquired it at Sotheby's for $1 million and put it, and put it in your, I don't know, like in your
Yeah,
living room. That's a different motivation. Just putting it out there.
I 100% agree. Actually, I do buy things to look at. I buy things to not use them. I have bought weird shoes which I maybe will wear once a year, but I like how they are. Uh, I like what they stand for, and that is like the other part of this is because we were all about craftsmanship and making shoes, but this time we wanted to do that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So
And
wait,
and
what
and
happened with your second company?
so that is still running. Our team in Pakistan is running that company. It's more focused on Pakistan, and
That's
they're running that.
great. So you don't have US operation anymore of that one.
Yeah,
Okay, you're focusing on atoms. Okay.
items. Yeah. And then we started inviting friends to like, hey, we are making these new sneakers, and they would like give us feedback. They would also. So when we would invite them, actually, I became really good at making breakfast. So I would make breakfast for customers who are coming at our house. We were operating from our like San Francisco apartment, uh, and then I was making like chai and like we were just very good host and generally interested actually because it was taking us some real effort to find that person we wanted to get feedback from. So we wanted feedback from a certain kind of people, which I
Right.
mentioned,
You
people who
narrow
have good
it
taste.
down to a person with a taste, that creative person who has a good taste. And
Good
then
taste.
within that is,
Yeah,
it's like you were digging deeper.
yeah. And then at the same time, uh, we really worked. I mean, we worked hard on our shoes, and we made a
No,
shoe
but tell
that
me
suits.
more about finding that customer. That's why I sort of asked you, because I want to understand. A lot of brands just stop and saying, "Oh, we want a like creative class or a Henry or like someone with taste," but they don't go further than that. So, what sort of motivated, and what did you find? What are the subgroups within that person with taste?
This is a very good question. There is a lot of philosophy in there, which I have learned is you almost want to live that person's life to really understand who they are. And that is like, I think is essence for many time when you are building something for someone. You want to feel what they go through. So we were inviting them, we were asking them questions, we were like getting their feedback, we were like asking their story, and we were learning like how they were making decisions. And what we found within that person was there were people like who wanted to like not signal anything because they just look purely like as at shoes as a tool. And then there were people like who wanted something to signal the simplicity or clarity of their thoughts, and they wanted a very simple shoe. uh, and then we also discovered that there were people like who was going to wear our shoes every day, and then there were people who are going to wear our shoes for 5 days a week, and they have like other shoes as well. And then we also found out that um, what what do they say about them at that time when we just so at that time it's very interesting. At that time we thought that we are making the perfect everyday shoes, the best everyday shoes, or actually we called it ideal everyday shoes. People were also drawn to our shoes because of mine and Sidra's story. These two, uh, husband and wife, they come from Pakistan and started with baby steps like their first company and now got here. So at that time, we did not appreciate our own story as much. Maybe it's the immigrant thing where you like kind of like undervalue yourself and you like undersell yourself. So we were not really paying
Yeah,
attention.
that's very, because you're like, oh, I'm here. It's a new identity.
Yeah. Or I have no identity. I do not need to
Blank
build an
slate or
identity.
something.
Blank
Yeah,
state.
yeah. Well,
But
that's what
people
I
are,
mean. You can like, that's the whole thing is like, you can be whatever you want to be. So it's sort of, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it is an immigrant thing because I'm the same way. I'm like, I don't talk
I,
about it. Yeah.
yeah, I think like, so I actually was having conversation with our executive coaches, and they talked about that because you guys grew up in Pakistan, and there was a colonialism over there. And then when I first came to the US, I mean, when I was going in Pakistan, if you speak good English, you are smart. Like I did not speak good English. So there was all these things that were going on in our mind. And that is what I now appreciate when I said about like the first product of any person. When you do your first work, there is a lot going on in your mind. Like I'm sure when you had the first episode of this podcast,
Mhm.
business of aspiration, there was a lot that was going on in your mind, and now you are much more calmer, much more like you know what you are doing. So uh, so that is where we were, and we said we will name it Atoms. So we were thinking about the shoes before we even had a name.
Yeah.
uh,
Mhm.
that is another mistake which I feel like sometimes creative entrepreneurs or creatives make is like they try to they try to get an umbrella before trying to see what it does. So I would say like start with a painting, start with like a sketch, start with a line before you like decide what this whole thing is going to be, and that let that journey decide what how to name it and what to make of it.
So you named the atoms.
Because we wanted to make, so we saw that all the sneaker industries, all the sneaker companies, they make hundreds of different products and they launch different colors, different collaborations, but no one is really focused on improving the actual shoe.
Right, that platonic ideal of everyone is like riffing off once that design-wise platonic ideal is made, everyone's just adding on, and you wanted to go to that elementary particle.
yes, we wanted to go to an atomic level to make the shoe better, and
Right, and
that's where the name.
right, yeah,
Yeah. So,
that's that kind of source code. What is the DNA of a perfect shoe? And there's all atoms, but they're like smaller particles than atoms, though.
yes, yeah. You are right. Maybe we will go there sometime, but right now we are going to focus on atoms. I think that would be still
Sounds like yeah, small enough, right, right.
yeah.
So, and then you were like, okay, this is that one shoe, and you prototype that, and where are you making your shoe, and who is making, and who is designing?
Yeah. So Sidra and I have strong ideas about design, and like we have strong opinions about most things we do. And we like it's also like a whole story of like how we found like shoe designer to work with. We were going a lot to uh, Portland. We were going to where Nike headquarters is. A lot of shoe designers there. We were going to all over the country. We were also talking to our team in Pakistan, and we finally worked with someone in Portland on the initial design. And it was not that simple to get them to make that shoe, because that's another thing. So all the sneaker designer, they were like just making same thing, approaching same thing from different point of view, and we wanted something very, very simple. So that is like which was difficult parts. It's like simplicity can get very complicated. And then I remember actually we worked with them for like 6 weeks, and then they sent us designs, and they were like not at all where we wanted them to be. So we took a urgent flight, went to Portland, and when I went to that designer's office, it was like a Japanese simplicity office, and I said, just make a shoe like your office. That's what I want.
Uh-huh.
And he said, that's the hardest thing ever. And
Yes.
it's like that if you have to make only one thing, it's worth picking the hard thing, if you're just doing one thing. And that helped us really big time. And then we started talking to factories and materials factories around the world. So we
In the
decided to make
US, in Pakistan, or somewhere else?
we were talking everywhere, like US, China, Vietnam, Pakistan, and Korea. And we decided to go all in South Korea. So South Korea is an interesting, actually, footwear industry, which not many people know, because now shoes are made in mostly China or Vietnam.
Right.
Nike started making most of their shoes in Korea like several decades ago, and they built an entire industry over there. When Korea became so expensive, they had to move out of Korea to go to China and Vietnam. But they still do most of their research and development with their partners in Korea. So we said like, okay, that is great. We can learn from all of this experience that Nike built. And actually, like, that's something we learned is we are like big fan of Nike's product approach. And there's a lot that we learned from them. And one of the things we learned from them is they literally built institutes in Korea to teach people how to make shoes, how to approach shoes, because they really wanted to be the Nike. Because if you see, there are most industries in the sneaker industry, there is Nike, and then there is Adidas, and then there is everyone else, and there is like Puma and all everyone else too. But Nike is really not in every industry is like a Nike level winner. Like mostly it's like everyone is at the same, just competing with each other. So we learned that from like it's as much as academic and educational as much as it's like actual product.
Uh-huh.
So we were able to make the samples, and then we were like selling those to our customers, early customers. We had no website. We had just like a small wait list, and people started responding to that, and they started tweeting about that, and they started posting it on Instagram. And then like some of them like, hey, we want to invest in your company. And we started to incorporate Atoms, and then we started raising some money. This is 2017 and 2018. And then we in 2018, we were actually very fortunate that some of the best investors in Silicon Valley, they were like really interested in what we were doing.
What did you impress them like when you look back at it, or even now? What do you think that impressed your investors?
I think it's combination of several things. One was when you see a good quality product and a sense of a vision behind that, and then you meet the creator and you learn that this was not an accident.
Uh-huh.
It was not an accident that they made these shoes. They are really passionate about it. They are all in. Their whole story leads them to here where they are going, and they are the right people to build that. I think that was what it was. And then we were really able to break down that, hey, we are all about customers. And yes, we are a product focused company, but at the end of the day, we are a product focused company because we want to care. We want to make the best product for our customer.
Right. So I think that what I understand what you're saying, I just want to break it down for the audience in a sense that having passion is great, but what sort of came through is that very strong dedication to your vision, because you have a lot, not you, but we have a lot of startups who start their business in order to sell. And I think that is a big difference between those GMO DTC brands and those brands that, like yours, that have a sense of purpose. And your internal culture, you and your wife's culture and vision and values and the way you approach things is what you put out there. And
Yeah.
I think that is something that's very important for us to unpack now in terms of growth, because unless you have that sort of, you got investment as many other companies got investment. So that's not your differentiator. And good for you that you got it from the best. What is your differentiator is that you're playing a long game. And that you decided to grow slowly. You didn't take that money and put it in customer acquisition. You didn't put it in like putting ads on Subway. You instead went back to make your product better and keep doing that. So how do you see yourself growing?
Yeah, actually, this is something which we and we started that way, and then we made these mistakes which you're mentioning too. We made these mistakes. I just must admit that, and we learned our lesson from there. I think what we learned is like, if your product is not, so when I say product, it's like the shoe, it's like the team, it's like the purpose, it's like what it says about me, all of that. So when I think if you need to find people who truly love what you do. Like in start, we did not had shoe boxes of our own. We were selling Atom shoes in sample boxes of factories, and people were buying them at full price. Now we have one of the best shoe box in the world. Like Adidas recently copied our shoe box for one of their limited edition run. Like they copied our. I'll send you Atoms, and you will see when you open that, it's like magical. And people were like talking about like this small startup bit, Apple to packaging, and how beautiful their packaging is. So I think like that, you want to be able to a place where people can buy. Let's say if you are selling a shampoo, and you even don't have a bottle, are people willing to buy like that shampoo? Like, because not only how good is for your hairs, but also how much passion you have put into that, like actual liquid, actual like product. I think that is a lot of time missing in companies, and that happens only when someone in the founding team or like one of the founders, or ideally both of them, are extremely passionate about that. And we see this in musicians, we see this in artists, like pure artists, because an artist or actual musician is just trying to make music that they love, like, and then they like just like, and people would love the music the same way if this was a small band at a local bar versus if it's on top of Spotify. So you have to be able to sell your music at a small bar and have people love that before you put money to get it on Spotify. If that
Right,
makes sense.
right, of course. And I mean, sometimes you don't even need to put money to get in Spotify if if you put music that enough people are going to love and tell others about. And we now see a lot of those success stories from, for example, now everyone is talking about Telfar Clemens, which is a fashion brand. He's been around for what, more than 16 years, something like that. and that he designed for himself, for his friends, black and brown, queer, New York downtown scene, disco, you know, DJing, the entire, the music scene. And now everyone is talking about his bag, but his bag is just, they don't understand, his bag is just one part of his entire story, his entire industry. You know, he's just really passionate about creating things that are unisex, that are sex, that you feel no matter what gender or in between gender, you know, like however you define yourself. So I think that is something that that now it's bubbling up, whereas before we had those companies that bombarded us with sort of, as I said before, subway ads and that millennial pink and like avocado green aesthetic, and then later with, you know, like there is that sort of cookie cutter approach, but all of them seem to be in a business of growing fast because they got the VC money and they have to exit very quickly. And then all of a sudden there is breakage because internal culture is not what you promote externally. So how do you manage VC's expectations in terms of your own growth? Are there any pressures?
I think, yeah, this is a good point. So we raised $8.1 million round after that when we were before launch, just around the launching the company, and it was a lot of pressure. It felt like a lot of pressure, and in a way it still does. Thankfully, we have thankfully we are in a position where our investors are really good people, and they understand. They also understand that and I think like some of like the important brands and these companies are only founded when someone is really passionate about them. Otherwise, they cannot be succeeded. So they understand that this has to happen in a natural way, and you cannot artificially grow that. You cannot make people fall in love artificially. Like you can make the best packaging, you can make everything, but if the main ingredients are not there, it's not going to work. So yes, that's like where we decided that we are going to invest more on like things that are about our values. So one decision we made was move from San Francisco to New York City. So Sidra and I both are very passionate about art and design and creativity of all sort. And we want to build a brand that talks about our passion about these things, that really translate our values. So we decided to move to New York City, and all of the investors were supportive, and they knew why we were going there. So we did that, and then we also launched a Soho pop-up in last year, and we did like 5 events. One event we did with Humans of New York, Brandon Stanton. One event we did a conversation on curating your own life, which was someone from Whitney Musing, some of the top artists and curators from New York City. We did a film screening by New York Nico. We had like small music events over there. So we really were like showing what our passion are, and people were responding to that.
Yeah, I mean, this is all fascinating, and I did not know about it. I'm sorry I did not know about it. I'll have to Google it about all those events that you created. How did you get access to all of that?
It's a long story. It's a long story. It is. I'll tell you. I'll tell you why.
Something in Standard. You had Humans of New York. You had something in Whitney. So pick one.
I'll tell you this. So yesterday, not yesterday, day before yesterday, I received a message from Ernest, our new mutual friend, and he's like, hey, Wakas, we need to talk. I was speaking with Anna, and she's like, you must talk to Wakas. I think it is building these real relationships when people like put their own value and their own reputation for you, and you do the same for them. Like I cannot tell you, we could not have been here, and we will never be where we want to be without like the help of people. Like it's very important. And actually, that's another interesting part. So a part of our company's mission is also like impact, and that is something which I and Sidra and I deeply care about. That we from first hand we understand that not everyone has a chance to do great work. They never like are in a position to do great work. Like they are just so much debating about like how it's their day-to-day life. So we like, this is another value which we talk about internally at Atoms, and we are doing some work on that, which hopefully will come out in next few months. We already are doing behind the scene things. So for example, sometime Atoms would if there is a small Kickstarter project by an artist, we will fund the entire Kickstarter project. Like if it's not succeeding, we would. Recently during COVID, I started personally doing things where I was like, uh, for the first time in my life, I learned that artist in New York City, as much as it sounds cool, it's one of the hardest jobs in the world because you could be an artist in New York City and not able to live in the city. So I started Venmoing some
Hopefully
of those.
changing, but you know.
Yeah, yeah. So I started Venmoing those artists of friends of mine, like, hey, this is advance for an art which we might make in some day, which we might not make, but use the money. We need it. So these are things which we are learning. So one of the challenge is going to be how we bring our own personal values into what we do, how we bring it to atoms. I think like some of the most important companies and brands, and I think religions are the ultimate brand, which I believe something I learned doing this research. Um, Unisex is another important part of every successful brand. So that's why atoms are also unisex. And this is something which we learned while all the best of the best products are unisex. Music is unisex, food is unisex, house is unisex, um, uh, tool, pens are unisex, notebooks are unisex. Um, and you will see that. And very soon you will see like gender becoming more of a liability than like maybe for many people it will be identity, but it's very interesting how
I
we
think
talk about
it's
alpha.
fading in the background,
Yeah,
really. Same way, like it's very. I'm glad you brought it up because the same way that social hierarchies, economic hierarchies, class hierarchies already have broken up. I think now that we're going, that gender is becoming something that we're like, wait, why did we ever do this? You know what I mean? Like so. I think that's great. That's a great point.
yeah. So I think the challenge is how we build a brand that is truly personal to us.
But you're right, business-wise, I think that gender clothing is liability. It like business because it limits your growth. So anyway, go on.
Yes. So it limits your. It started. I think it started as an opportunity. Let's make products for men and sell to men. Let's make
Right.
products for women
Yeah.
and and even I said something actually we learned in the footwear industry is a sneaker culture. Um, Sneaker used to be very men focused, and women would want to wear the female version of the men's sneaker. They would still want the men's sneaker. And now there are more brands in the sneaker industry and clothing that are like more focused on unisex. So I think that is, I guarantee that this is here to stay, and this is going to be a lot more powerful element of fashion and culture. That unisex is the new, like one some of your favorite experiences are unisex. Like, hey, let's go to listen to music. It's unisex. You don't have to be male or female to listen to that. So
That's true. So you mentioned food, you mentioned houses, you mentioned music.
pen, notebooks.
Maybe, but like see with like cultural products, there are still like movies. Either I don't know if that's marketing or it's the. I
I
think
think it's both. Yeah, I think we both are at the same point which we're thinking there is something to it, and that is which we will find out. But I think unisex is going to be hopefully the new default and not like the clothing in for men and women.
that's what yours. So you have one shoe for men and women. Sizing is like.
Yeah, we also make in quarter size. So what we learned is so this is how we approach. So we launch every year, we launch one shoe, and every year we really improve it so that everyone knows like, hey, all the improvements that we have made on our shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And then how we make it personal. So that is like where we are going beyond that. If Anna walks more, how her atoms can be more comfortable for walking, and if Vikas stands more, how can his atoms be more comfortable for standing all day?
Mm-hmm.
And if she likes simple laces and Vikas likes colorful laces in his shoes, how we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that is like where we are thinking about. It's not the choice that people want, it's the personalization that they want. And personalization is not what you decide is personalization. Personalization is what appeals to customers really like beyond like their purchase, like, oh wow, this is cool. That you know what, that's I'm talking about. And
Mhm.
another example is, you use an iPhone, I use an iPhone, same product. Your iPhone could not be more different than my iPhone, where you keep your app, which apps you have on your phone. So these are things that you will see, like this. So actually Apple was a big inspiration for us, like in terms of making few products, making them really, really well, and offering some level of personalization and improving them every year. So
So that is what you're like, one more thing. That's how Steve Jobs would always close with one more thing.
yeah,
Like, ooh, that is like a tablet. Or like, like.
we are working on things that are one more thing level, hopefully, and you will see that. And actually, like we sent our shoes to Johnny Ive, and he wrote us a handwritten letter back that he loved our shoes. So, and then like a friend of mine, he did the Think Different campaign for Apple, and he was really drawn into our shoes. So yeah, we are big fans of Steve's original Steve, and what why he started Apple. So we are. And the other actually answer to your question is, I do not hesitate to reach out for interesting people. I am never hesitate. Um, and interesting people are not necessarily like people up high in hierarchy. They can be like people, everyday people. They can be people you know other people don't talk to. So that is what inspires me sometimes, having this ability to like talk to people regardless of where they come from and where they are.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, yeah, it's like, yeah. I have
And
a lot of, like, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and I have like this one next final point, which I think is what is my job at Atoms, or what is Atoms' job is. As much as we want to build a brand which is about the product and about like the the ease of use and the best in the world, we believe like we were already like, I used to say this thing like, when you become an established brand, when you become like really, really big company or a big brand, at that point you have to become an activist, else you will just disappear. And activism is not necessarily social justice activism, it can be any kind of activism. So an early example from Apple was, they said that we will not support flash on our websites, on our products, so on our apps, or like we are not going to add buttons on our phone, or we are not going to do like these many like ports in our phone, or we are just going to focus. So and Patagonia is the ultimate example when it comes to activism. And when you look at Nike, like Nike's product and Nike's marketing, but then they have their activism marketing, which works best for them. Like, is like you see Serena Williams ads, and you see like,
I prefer Patagonia example and Apple example because Apple also has a strong stance on privacy, which
yeah,
is exactly, they're like, okay, everyone else, Facebook, Google, they're taking your data, we are not. And they're like, they go even to the extremes when they wouldn't release the data to FBI when there was a shooting. So they make their core tenet of their identity. And also Apple started from a vision to advance creativity of a humankind, to create tools that advance human creativity. That was like back then. So yes, I absolutely agree. I call that in the future there won't be any B Corps, because every corporation is going to be a B Corp, because that is part of the balance sheet, social good. That's why it's like the aspirational economy is when you put social value, environmental value on the same level as economic value, and you find a way to capitalize on both, like Patagonia is capitalizing on
100%. Yeah, Atoms is not a B Corp. And even though we do these things, Sidra and I donated 1% of Atoms to a nonprofit in New York City, which we will announce later this year. Um, and we never talked about that. So we do a lot of like impact work, which we do not talk about.
right.
And I think like we need to build this, do this for the right reason before we start talking about it. I was actually just reflecting on a lot of brands who have like these mission statements, or like they have like these missions of some sort. And I feel like, so and this is like what I truly feel is like, until like you have skin in the game, you are not doing it. You need to have skin in the game. That's like where I believe there's an opportunity for Atoms. Like Nike does all of this marketing around like people of color, and some of the best athletes are people of color. But if you look at their headquarters, it's all white men. Like in Portland, they actually were recently under a lot of fire. So that's where I think is like how much you bring.
I mean, apparently they do have a high percentage comparatively, but again, there is a difference between virtue signaling and having skin in a game, and until it costs you, you're not doing it right.
Until it costs you, you're not doing it.
Yeah. So I think like it's very smart approach. Also, you can't just like put a lipstick on a pig. You really need to be passionate about that mission. So if you're interested in art and design, and if you're supporting artists, that is something that comes natural to you, that can't be faked. And brands are very naive. They think that they can fool people, and now is the time to sort of rebuild that DNA and put these new sort of values that are that we are asking for now at the front and center, and then build a community around those values. And you can't just be like put brown or a black models in a campaign. That's not doing it.
Yeah, 100%. I think the fire you want to lit in the world first should start from your house.
Yeah.
If that
put your house on fire.
Yeah, like I think so. I think like so the fire analogy I used is there are a lot of fires burning in my heart. There are a lot of fires burning in everyone's heart, especially what we are all going through. There are so many like things happening in the world, and COVID and all the lockdowns. They just have like, this is what it is. You and I was, for example, like I was not buying products early on, and then all of a sudden I started shopping. I started shopping for things that appealed to me, like started buying more art. And I'm like, hey, I thought I will never spend money during like when I'm not going out at all, but actually I spend more. And I'm buying these books, which some of the books I will read, and some of the books I might read in 20 years or 10 years, but I'm buying them because they say something about me. They signal something to me. So what you do, how that signals to you personally, how that signals to your company internally before you talk about outside. And here is the hard part. The hard part is when I will switch off uh, uh, this call and I'll go on social media, I will see X company is doing really well. This person is doing really well. They are doing it, and you're like, oh, we are still small. We are still early, and that's like which I think is 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 both a weakness and strength if you like don't get like carried away by that. And so I think you have to stay true to yourself.
What other people are doing, you can be happy for them, but you need to focus on what you are doing. And it's best when you're not comparing yourself to anyone else but yourself. So that is my own experience, and that leads to greatest happiness and satisfaction.
Yeah, and I think like finally, like my point is these days what I am doing is as a founder in the company is working on like what we stand for, and what is that we can do today that change we would want to see 50 years from now in the world.
Right.
And I think that is what is more important. That is my learning from Patagonia. They were talking about sustainability and environment way before it was cool or it was on the internet, you know.
Right.
And there is like I could not recommend that book like more. And then there are things like so I'm like right now reading a lot about environment, activism, social justice, and like what is that really change we want to see. Yes, we want to make our issues as a tool for creative people for the everyday, but what we want creative people to do. And that's like these are questions that I'm asking, like, hey, can atoms help next John Lewis? Can atoms help a young AOC? Or can atoms help like inspire someone to be Dr. King? And these are like big ideas, but I think if you have the courage to like think about that, there is a way. And that is like place where I would want to be. Like we would rather fail on what is hard instead of succeeding what is like easy and everyone is doing it.
That is it. That's the long game, and I agree with that. And I always tell my clients, think about 10 years and then ask, what do I need to do today? What do I need to do tomorrow in order to see that what I want to see in 10 years happen. So
It is so hard though. It is so hard though.
it is, but if you don't do that, it's then even harder, because then you're just doing what everyone, you're copying everyone else. You don't know what you know, you don't know what you stand for. You run in this direction and then you run in that direction. Isn't it much better to have your North Star? And it's kind of like, it's harder, but it's way more satisfying. And it's also like, it gives you advantage that comes from your own identity. It doesn't come from others and copying others and so on.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's wrap this up. 2 final questions. What is next for Atoms in 2 sentences? And yeah, how do you see, like, actually, what is next is the last question. The question before that is, if you focus on one shoe, how do you see growth? Through personalization, or do you plan to add other products?
So we plan to make one main shoe, and we want to have few variations of our main shoes that will appeal to different people. For example, we will have a pink color. It's not necessarily that it will appeal to women and young women. It will appeal to men who like pink as well. And there are people who like pink. I like pink color a lot. So that's like an idea. I think we will grow because some people will really love us, and then they will tell their friends about us. That's how we'll grow.
Okay, and then what's next? What do you have in your...
I think 2 things. Yeah, 2 things. One is on the bringing these values out, bringing the fire out. Like, what are we thinking? Who we are through content, through campaigns, through actual work. Actually, before you write content about who you are, you need to do that. So we are working on small things and we are working on big things. So we will talk about them, what we are. And we will be launching our next model next year as well. So there is a lot that, so we start working on things way ahead of time. So it's been like almost a year which we're working on the shoe that will be launched next year. And we are just learning a lot from that.
Right. All right. So like, this was fantastic. And just to summarize the lessons, if you will, because I feel that this conversation requires like lessons. First is like, look at the world as if you're seeing it for the first time every day, which is hard in itself, not to have any sort of prejudices and stereotypes and presumptions. And you're like, we don't know anything about the shoe industry. We don't know anything about the customer. We're going to go and we're going to observe and we're going to learn and reverse engineer everything we can. But then have amazing empathy for the world at large, not just for the customers. Then go slow, and then go slow, but plan for next 50 years. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, I think the other part is just do it for yourself. Just do it very personally. I think every one of us inherently has a very beautiful, good human inside who we deeply care about. Do it for that person, and I think everything else will take care.
That's a wonderful way to end this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you.